Man, did you see how that very first page is exactly what Ian needed to fix the connectivity errors for his Xbox? That's amazing. You know what's even more amazing? Somebody actually had to write that page, and they got paid for it. And perhaps most amazing of all, they probably got to play with an Xbox while they did it. If that sounds like a pretty sweet gig, stay with me. In this video, we're going to talk about the kind of person who writes that job or writes that page, and what that job is like. But first, let's do some introductions. My name is Katie Ferguson, and I'm a technical writer. You might notice me refer to my notes occasionally. It's because I don't do this very often. Now that's aside. Let's talk for a minute about what kind of my story and how I got to be a technical writer, because I wasn't always a technical writer. When I was in middle school or so, I discovered that I really liked reading and writing, but I also really liked science, math, technology, kind of that stuff. And the only way I ever heard of those things combining was as a science writer. So when I got to college, I decided to become a science writer, science journalist. Well, I changed my major 3 times in that time. 3. And I ended up with a major called Technical, Scientific, and Professional Communications. What a mouthful. Oh my gosh. Well, perhaps not surprisingly, I did not get a job as a science journalist right off the bat. Actually, what I got was pretty much the opposite of science journalism. I got a job writing lab reports for the FDA. Boring. Well, it didn't take me very long to get out of that, and I kind of was a little bit at loose ends. I spent some time teaching middle school PE teachers how to do bike training classes. You might know a few middle school PE teachers. They're pretty cool. I also ended up getting a job and working for quite a while as what's called a financial advisor. I was helping people make good choices with their money. But through all of that, I found that what I loved the most was the writing part. Every time I got to write down things, write down steps, write down ideas, anything involving writing made me really happy. So eventually I found my way to the job that I have today, which is documenting or writing about financial software. You can see how it kind of merged or blended together that time that I spent doing the financial advice and the time that I spent as a technical writer. It ended up being perfect. But hold on. There's a couple of important themes you may have noticed already. These are life themes. They don't have anything to do with technical writing, but I want to call them out because this is actually really important. If you don't get anything else out of this video, pay attention right now. Theme number 1. Notice that my career path was not a straight path. A lot of the times, when I was in school, I thought I was supposed to know what I wanted to do, get a degree in that thing, and then go get a job in that thing, and there I was, done. That is not how it happened for me, and if you talk to other adults in your life, you'll probably find that's not how it happened for them either. It's very unusual and rare for an adult to know, as a kid or a young adult, I want to do this thing, to get the major in that, to get their first job in that, and just stay with it for the rest of their lives. Super uncommon. So don't worry. I changed my major 3 times. I changed my job multiple times. It took me a long time to end up where I'm at. So keep on learning, keep on exploring. You'll get there eventually. Now, theme number 2 is kind of related. How did I know when I landed in the right spot? Well, throughout all of my different jobs, I kept noticing, hey, you know what I love the most? I love the part where I get to write. I knew writing was something that I loved. So try to think about what are things that you're interested in, passions that you have. Now, I also love other things. I love reading, but I couldn't find a job where somebody just paid me to read all day long, unfortunately. I love to ride my bike, but I didn't get a job where people paid me to ride my bike. No, but I found a job where I get to write every day, and I get to think about writing things a lot. And although that doesn't mean that I'm perfectly happy at my job all the time, it's not all rainbows and unicorns and total glitter party. I am happier at my job more often than I'm unhappy. And that's a pretty good way to be. So think about what kind of itch can you scratch with your job. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a good start. Okay, well, now we've gotten those themes out of the way. Let's talk for a second about technical writing and what kind of person enjoys technical writing. First of all, this might not be surprising, but you gotta love reading, writing, and words, but you also should be interested in STEM topics like, biology or coding or math. There's lots and lots of need for good writers who can understand these technical concepts. Technical writers are translators. They are able to go between technical people. Highly technical people tend to talk in a lot of really complicated, complex technical terms, and regular people don't tend to understand those complex technical terms. So technical writers are able to go talk to these technical people. They understand what's going on, but then in their brains, technical writers are able to say, let me take this complex concept and translate it into this not simpler concept, but into words that regular people can understand. And so that's why, that's the sort of fundamentally what a technical writer does. Okay, so the next thing, a characteristic of a person who might be a good technical writer is you pay attention to details. You know how on Scantron tests, they always tell you, hey, check the bubble before you move on to the next question. It's really easy to, fill in B instead of C. Well, if you're the kind of person who actually checks the Scantron bubble before you move on to the next question, technical writing might be a good fit for you. Attention to detail is really important. But possibly the most important thing is that you need to be empathetic, you need to be a good listener, and far and away, you need to love learning. Technical writers love learning more than anything else. They spend all day long learning new things. If you don't like learning new concepts, quit this video right now. It is not for you. Technical writing is not for you. You've got to love learning. Okay, now we've gotten rid of those guys who aren't interested. Let's actually dig into what a technical writer really does. Now, remember how I mentioned learning? Well, one great way that we spend time learning is by talking to people who know about the topic. So in my case, let's take a look at a real example. In this example, I have learned about a new feature that my company is going to be rolling out. And I've already written down what I think is true about it, but I go to the expert, her name is Kara, and I make sure, I'm asking her about how does this work? Well, here's how our conversation went.
So, the bullet points below that, source those from?
That was from the asset allocation spec. And so I was really having a hard time getting this because it was not the holdings. Like I found the page that QA wrote about it, but it didn't really tell me kind of like what I needed to know from the client side. And then I found the asset allocation page that had been written about GCS, back in the day.
So the problem with that is that I wrote that page a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
When we were talking about more enhancements to add to the asset allocation.
Yeah. Okay, so which of these are actually happening, if any?
The second bullet under group by improvements accounts with value.
Yeah, the zero value.
And we should double check that.
Yep. Oh yeah, that was that thing you sent me.
Yep.
Yep.
Everything else I think is not happening. And the big exciting thing to call out is just the performance improvements around all of those reports.
Oops. I thought I knew all about this. I thought I understood this, but she actually had some corrections for me, and that's great. That makes me happy because it means my documentation is going to be better than it was before. Mistakes are not a failure. Mistakes are an opportunity to make your page better. So Cara gives me these corrections, and I go back and I fix them. But then later, she sent me a message. And look at, here's some links. In the links, I was able to follow those links to learn more information about the changes in that story. So I ended up doing a little bit more research on my own as well. So then you'll notice how this was basically like I was being kind of like a detective. I was sleuthing out. Where's the information that I need? It started with me doing my own research on my own. I wrote down what I thought I knew, but then I got more information from the expert. She gave me more information still in those links and on those pages, and then it circled back to me reading about those and doing research on my own. So it's all sleuthing and trying to discover information wherever you can learn about that feature. Now, of course, a big one is playing with the new feature on the product. Now, this is why I mentioned the Xbox people probably played with the Xbox, because you really need to get your hands on and really try it out so you can document clearly. Now, I would show you what that looks like in our product, but there's proprietary stuff in there. And to be honest, it's actually a little bit boring. It's all just for financial people anyways. Ultimately, though, the point is I had to understand how this new feature works well enough to do a good job writing it down so that the very non-technical people who use our software are able to understand the feature and predict what the product is going to do. So here's what my final draft looked like that actually went live into production. Okay, well, so that actually leads us to writing. You may be watching this video because you saw writing and you're like, aha, I love writing, I love reading, tell me more about writing. And now you're going, when are we going to talk about writing? Well, this is it, this is the time, let's talk about writing. Now, let's say I've already done all my research, I understand how this new feature is supposed to work, at least I think I do. Well, once I understand the topic at hand, I start my documentation process. Now, the process varies quite a bit depending on what the feature is. Maybe, obviously, each writer has their own process, but in general, here's what I tend to do. First, I review, outline, and draft. I review what's in the Help Center already. What do we already have documented? Maybe I only have to update another page or two. I don't have to write a lot. Then I create an outline. You're like, time out, outline? My English teacher makes me do outlines and I hate it. It feels like a complete waste of time. Well, sorry, it's not a waste of time when you're a technical writer. And if you become a technical writer, you probably will spend a lot of time writing outlines. So there you go. Then I write my draft. The outline helps me to see where do I need images, what kind of pictures can I use to help illustrate things, where do I have to write steps, where do I have to explain things. It's really helpful. And so I'm using that outline to then write the draft of the page. Well, once the page is written and drafted, then I go to review ×2. In this review is when I send it to the expert and have them check to make sure that I've gotten all the technical details correct. They're not as worried about making sure the words are perfect, but they say, hey, you missed this part of the feature, or you described this part wrong. And so that's one review. The other half of the review ×2 is I tend to have a writer review. Other writer in my company takes a look at what I wrote, and they do what's called a copy edit. A copy edit is basically just to read and make sure that I didn't make any grammar mistakes, I didn't make any typos or spelling errors, anything like that that would just look embarrassing when it goes live. They make sure that my writing looks and reads reasonably well. Okay, so when we're done with that step, then it's on to the final push to revise, to review, and to publish. Revising, well, okay, so I've just gotten all these comments, right? Expert comments, writers, other copy edit comments. I use my own writerly discretion and decide what of these comments and changes should I actually make to make this page better. I make those changes. Then I put it out into a test place where I can take a look at the page and test and make sure that it looks okay. I check all the links. I look at the images and make sure that they look good. I read everything. I make sure that in the context of the page, it looks good. And then finally, I publish it. And that's really exciting because now it's live. It's out in the wilds of the internet, and our users actually are starting to get benefit from all that writing. It's really exciting. Okay, you may be thinking, geez, that is a lot of reviewing. Like almost every step said something about review. Yeah, and you know what? It was not a mistake because we spend so much time checking our work. It's critical for us to get the information right on our page. Think about this. Have you ever had a set of steps that were not well written and it was really frustrating trying to follow them? Or think about Ian. What if the page that he had found about fixing your connectivity errors in an Xbox was missing a step? Well, that would be so frustrating. He's trying step 1, got it, step 2, got it. Oh no, I don't see what they're talking about in step 3. Well, it's because they forgot something in the middle. So we have to make sure that our pages are accurate and cover everything because otherwise users get really frustrated and we want to make sure that they're relying on our information and it's there for them. Well, of course, we know there's a happy ending for Ian. The writer who did the research, did the outline, did the review, published the page, it all came together and made the page that he needed to get his Xbox going and he got his game running and he was happy. So if you think that that kind of thing sounds like a fun job or worth pursuing, there's some things that you can do right now, today, to start moving yourself in the right direction. First of all, this may seem kind of obvious, but first of all, take as many English and writing classes as you can. Any class also that teaches you about logic or rhetoric, those are kind of fancy words, but it's basically about how to arrange things and how to argue things. And they'll help you learn brevity and clarity. These are two fundamental cornerstones of technical writing. Brevity is saying it short. Why use 3 words when you could use 2? Clarity, of course, is saying it clearly. Next, read lots of different types of writing, but particularly pay attention to technical writing in your life. If you get a new phone, you'll notice it probably comes with, like a little sheet that talks about how to get started with your phone or whatever. That's technical writing. Look at that sheet. Think about the steps. What's missing? How could you write it better? Did they use pictures to help illustrate what they're doing? How did those pictures work? Did they work for you? Be thinking about that kind of stuff, and that's thinking like a technical writer that you can do right now, today. And then finally, the last thing is take a lot of different technology and science and math classes. Remember how I started off thinking I was going to be a science journalist. I got my first job doing something different. That's biology, lab report writing. But I ended up doing finance. That's more mathy kind of stuff. You just never know where you might end up. And so it's really helpful to be exposed to a whole wide variety of different things. Don't assume just because you love one thing, that's definitely going to be the thing. I always thought I was going to do biology. Here I am in finance. Well, anyways, those are some steps you can take today, right now, to start being ready to be a technical writer. And when you're done and you've graduated, you become a tech writer, I look forward to working with you someday on some documentation. Take care. See you then.